Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the HubOnomics report. Special guest with us today, Tim Hudak. When we talk about what we do with the sharing economy, not just in the United States but worldwide, many approach it from a position of fear. And what's exciting here is that we have someone in political office that is looking at this from a position of progress. Tim is a member of the Ontario Provincial Parliament for Niagara West and Glanbrook. And we're excited to have him. Tim, how are you?
I'm doing great, RC. Thanks for having me on the HubOnomics report. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Tim. So, hey, if you could just, your background is great. And just looking at your history here, you've done some pretty cool things over time. So if you could just give folks kind of a 30,000-foot view of your background.
Yeah, you bet. How long is this show going to be then? Ask a politician to talk about himself. We're going to be here for an hour. Yeah, so I'm for your American audience, I'm the past minority leader here in the province of Ontario. For Canadians or parliamentary systems, opposition leader. I come from the Niagara Peninsula, grew up right across from Buffalo, New York, and I've been doing this now for over 20 years. I know you're looking at me, you're saying, God, he looks like he's 30 years old. I got a few more years on me than that. I've played a role in cabinet as well as leading the Conservative Party here in Ontario. And where this all came about, well, there's two reasons on how I got interested in the sharing economy. So to make it interesting, I'll start with reason number two.
Okay.
And being here in the capital in Toronto, Ontario is kind of like a mix, a little bit of New York State and California, I would say, maybe Michigan and California.
That sounds pretty accurate.
40% of the Canadian economy. Toronto's the biggest city. And a lot of meetings here are provincial capital, Queen's Park in Toronto. And the cabs were always late getting me, or they wouldn't know, they don't know the building. It's this giant pink castle right in the middle of the main street called University Avenue. So this is back in October of 2014. One of my 20-something staffers said, have you ever tried Uber? And I said, well, that sounds suspiciously German. So I was a little cautious at first. You have German viewers as well?
Yes.
Give it a shot. And I said, holy smokes, I can actually, the guy carries him in his car. He's not on the phone, treats me professionally. I can rate him. And he rates me to make sure that I follow my mom's direction to use good manners when I'm out in the public. And they got me there on time. I could track the car, and I said, well, hold on a second. This is too good to be true. Government's going to do something to mess it up. So I decided to get involved, developed a legislative framework around ride sharing, home sharing, and parking sharing to give people an opportunity to make some extra money and give consumers like me a new option that's convenient and affordable.
Tim, thank you for the scope there. One of the things that we see in the U.S., especially at the political level, and I took my first Uber probably about 6 months after they were in business because I was still living in San Francisco at the time where it originated. One of the things that has happened at a political level here in the U.S. and I'm sure in other places is that there's been a lot of opposition. And as I talked about at the top, it seems to be out of fear. And what I've said publicly is, in a way, this is almost like the chickens coming home to roost. You had to expect technology to eventually move at such a pace, the way things were going, that you were going to have to figure out how to, I say, regulate, but make this work in an environment where everybody's safe and there's progress and there's commerce. What type of obstacles have you ran into in trying to present legislation or trying to tell this story to politicians where you are?
That old expression, there's nothing new under the sun. Largely the same things that have happened in major U.S. centers are happening now in Canada. We're later in the process. The legislation I created is the first of its kind in Canada, but I hope it does become a model for the other provinces. What are the obstacles? Well, there's politicians who don't understand it, who are very dated in their views, or quite frankly, they're a little too close to the existing cab drivers, and not really the cab drivers, I'd say more so the rich license owners that own those plates, and they squeeze every dollar they can out of the regular driver. So there's politicians that are a little too close in that respect. So what I've tried to do is to move this ball up the hill, to say that this gives people a chance to earn extra income, largely in their spare time. When it comes to home sharing, that'll bring a lot more tourists into areas, including districts like I represent in the beautiful Niagara Peninsula. And there are public benefits like parking sharing apps. We have two in Toronto, one called Honk Mobile, one called Rover, that actually have a very compelling case that they're good for the environment because they help me plan my trip downtown. I can book my parking spot ahead of time, navigate there, and I don't spend 10 minutes circling around a busy block.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, Tim, the home base for the HubOnomics report is a suburb of Orlando, Florida called Altamont Springs. And we ran the story, we were actually the first to break it, that Altamont Springs is the first city in the United States where Uber is experimenting with a subsidy. If your ride begins and ends in the city, they will pay 20% of your fare.
Really?
Really, yeah, it surprised us too. We're looking at this news and we're saying, wait, is this actually a thing? And so we called around to verify it. What they're trying to do is figure out if they can help with congestion. Altamont, even though it's a smaller city, has quite a bit of congestion. So they took it a step further. They said if your ride originates anywhere in the city and ends at the Sunrail station, we have a light rail system, we will pay 25% of your ride. So it was exciting to see the progress and that Uber kind of doubled down on this. We're not the bad guy. We're actually trying to figure out how to make this work. Do you see, Tim, a lot of that? Are people where you're at still kind of hanging on to that boogeyman culture? Let's take the cab companies or the license owners. Are they still hanging on to that Uber's the boogeyman, Airbnb is the boogeyman? Is that still a feeling?
Yes, but it's fading. So among those who are trying to protect their existing turf and frankly, the sweet deal they currently have at the expense of travelers, they'll still fight that and raise that boogeyman. I would say among the general public that there has been a significant shift to saying, look, this is more affordable. I can just hit a button on my smartphone and order a vehicle. I can send my babysitter home and track where that car goes. And you know what? I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions about who I go in a car with or who I rent a home. I don't need big brother government telling me that they check off all of these boxes. So public opinion, I see moving rapidly, particularly among young people, but even to those of us that have now, we don't like to brag about it, but crossed into middle age.
Same here, actually. I just had a birthday yesterday, so I'm getting there. Thank you. Thank you. Tim, so you were talking about home sharing. Obviously, that's Airbnb and some of the other services that are out there. Here in the U.S., we've ran some stories on the HubOnomics report about the inherent dangers of things like this, and also around communities that might otherwise be, say, downtrodden. But you have urban areas that are poorer, and what's happening is almost a gentrification process where investors come in, buy up these properties, they turn it into like a Soho type of district, and basically the people that used to live there can no longer afford to live there. And it's in San Francisco in particular, you're almost fighting like a wage war or a class battle. Are you seeing the same thing in Toronto? And what do you think about how that problem gets solved? Or is it that people are kind of creating the boogeyman again? Or how does that all work in your mind?
Yeah, well, there will be an adjustment period. There's no doubt about it. You asked me if it's happening in Toronto, the province of Ontario, only to a very small extent, because I think, again, our experience is not as advanced as a San Francisco would be. But it's starting to bubble up as I watch these issues. I mentioned earlier on the second reason why I was interested in the sharing economy. The first was actually home sharing. So I'm got two beautiful little girls, one who's 8, one who's 2. Fortunately, I have a beautiful wife, and when we go on trips, we found that we really had a choice. We could rent out 2 hotel rooms and pay twice as much money. We could rent out 1 hotel room, and with kids, nobody gets any sleep.
Right.
Or we decided to use, actually not Airbnb, but VRBO, to rent out a cottage. Our trips often actually into the States along the Atlantic Ocean. And so I said, you know what? I actually found that Deb and I trusted more so the 12 families like us that had used the place before, the pictures, the site to actually care about their corporate reputation. I found that a much better indicator than saying a hotel that was licensed, plus it gave us more options. So I hear what you're saying, but along with more of the shared units in less affluent neighborhoods and big cities, you're also bringing jobs. Those people are going to spend money in that local economy at tourist places, new restaurants, the hospitality side. So jobs come with it. Like, I get some neighbors may not be comfortable, but I think on balance, it's a very good thing.
Tim, staying on the home sharing thing, what we're seeing, and we ran a couple of stories on this back in January, is the hotel companies they have kind of 1 foot in the water, 1 foot out. It's like, and I think, we go back to this fear, is they're talking some strong bravado about, oh, this isn't a threat to us, it's a completely different business, but we're keeping our eye on it, or we're going to buy something similar and try to work around it. Tim, what is the future for the cab companies and the hotel chains? And I mean, even we've got some of the grocery and food delivery services. Uber is going into that area. What does the business future look like for those more traditional entities with all of these sharing economy stuff happening now?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty difficult to resist that old maxim, the customer is always right.
Hmm.
So I think you'll see these businesses respond to consumer behavior. And if they don't, they'll get left behind. So in your areas, what does that mean? Well, when it comes to the transportation side, I think what we need to do is to deregulate the cab industry as well, to take off some of these rules that come from the 1970s, 1960s off their backs, let them reinvent themselves and be a competitor
Hmm.
to Uber or Lyft. When it comes to hotels, I suspect they will actually, they're doing more on technology. I suspect instead of having every room the same wherever you are in the hotel room, they will individualize them and give us more choices in the type of room, the type of stays that we're going to have. We do see in car sharing that some of the big companies did end up, like Enterprise would buy a car sharing company. So
Hmm.
would a hotel possibly buy a home sharing? Sure. I mean, Airbnb is too big, but there may be others along the way. So I think we'll see that adaptation. And our job, I think, in politics is to start asking the question, not why should I allow this to happen, but why should I interfere? Right? You should only act, I think, if there's a demonstrative cause for the big hand of government to get involved. Otherwise, treat people as adults to make the decisions that are best for them, their families, or themselves, and then largely get out of the way.
Tim, that type of talk is long overdue. I mean, the U.S. of all places, we still have many cities, including San Francisco, that you have some factions that are vehemently fighting against these things, as you just said. And this is one of the reasons that we wanted to do this interview with you, because we believe that this needs to be said, and it needs to come not only from those who are kind of creating the innovation or the disruption, but those on the legislative side who are saying, look, we have to admit that we kind of got caught, let's say with our pants down, but in essence, we kind of got caught by this because in large part we weren't prepared. But the way to deal with it isn't so much to say why shouldn't we do this, is how can we help it? Our hope is that more and more people figure this out on the legislative side, and this speaks volumes of progress to us that you were able to stand up and say, look, if nobody else is going to talk about this, I have to talk about this. And I hope that what you've seen is that more legislators have kind of gone that way.
I hope so. I
Yeah.
hope so. I don't want to paint a false picture. There are many, probably still more on the opposite side of the arguments that I'm making that are resisting.
Hmm.
But using what I have, I guess, as being a former leader, a more senior member of the legislature here in Ontario, to say it's okay to stand this way. And by the way, there are a lot more people out there who support these changes, will make money from them, or benefit from more choices and pulling more along. And we're seeing progress on that.
Yeah. So Tim, let's get your take in short order on the future. Obviously, the sharing economy is not necessarily the Wild West, but it's almost like the track is being built while the train is waiting to go over the next set of track. In your mind, what does the future look like, let's say, in 2020 or 2025 for the sharing economy? Where do you see this going?
Hmm. So I guess it depends where President Trump stands on these issues. They're asking for prediction there. Yeah, I mean, the lessons we've learned, if we look at the last 5 years, is who the hell knows, right?
Hmm.
What's going to come up next? But I suspect at the end of the day, we'll see. Let me say this. What I'm watching is some of the larger sharing economy companies work in a much more positive, proactive way. And I think that's a good thing. That's typical of most mature businesses, that they'll look for solutions as opposed to surging ahead. By way of example, Airbnb has worked in a number of cities now to collect the hotel tax.
Right.
I think that's fair. Sharing information on where people are going within a city. Uber has a very powerful mechanism to help support solutions to major crowding on our highways and congestion. They've got information that public transit officials should kill for
Hmm.
about where people are actually traveling to. So if they establish partnerships with city governments, state or provincial governments, I think that helps pave the way, because honest to goodness, there are huge public benefits beyond just the personal benefits of the sharing economy when they can share that kind of information with decision makers, because otherwise we were always just guessing.
Boy, what a great finish, Tim. To that we were just guessing, and in a way that's a good thing, and we learn from it, and in some ways that can be to the detriment, especially to those we jokingly call dinosaurs, that don't want to catch up here and face some of the realities. Before we let you go, Tim, websites, places you're going to be, where you might be speaking. Obviously, we'd love to have you back soon, but what's happening with you right now?
So wait for Thursday. I'm actually in 2 days. I'm doing a second sharing economy bill. So I'm hosting a press conference in Toronto to describe new elements beyond those that we've addressed today to build on some momentum.
Wonderful.
TimHudak.ca.